It is day 26 of 66 and 26. We're back in the New Testament. We're in John chapters 10, 11, and 12. A lot of verses here, a lot of words that Jesus is speaking and John is telling us about Jesus. But of all those words, I want to focus in on just two words. And that is almost right in the center of these three chapters in John 11:35. It has often been pointed out that this verse, John 11:35, is the shortest verse in the entire Bible. Jesus wept. Just two words. Jesus wept. Why did Jesus weep? Well, this is in the context of the death of his friend Lazarus. And Lazarus has died. Jesus did not get to see him before he died. And he's about to raise Lazarus from the dead. Now, that might raise a lot of questions in the fact that, well, didn't Jesus know that he was just about to raise him? Why did he have to weep? Doesn't Jesus know that when someone dies, they're in the presence of God if they die in the faith? And the answer is yes, Jesus knew all those things. But even with the perfect knowledge of God, it does not take away the sting of death. Even God weeps. And I think that's really the significance of those words, that even God mourns the death of someone he loves. And he mourns at every death. And I think this is really important for us to remember, that death is not something that is just a natural part of life. The Bible teaches us that death came as an intrusion into all that God made. In the beginning, when God had made the heavens and the earth, and he made all the living creatures and the birds in the air and the fish in the sea and everything that creeps and crawls along the ground, it was all very good, and there was no death or destruction, no disease, no suffering. And then sin came in and corrupted, destroyed what God had made, and God weeps at that. God weeps at the consequence of sin in death. And so we see Jesus being very real, God himself weeping at the death of Lazarus. Now, we also should point out two other words in the same passage that are maybe even more important, and that is Jesus at the tomb of Lazarus says these two words, "Come out." He calls Lazarus out of the grave, which is actually a preview of all of our resurrections. When Jesus Christ comes back at the end of time, and if we've died before he comes back, then he is going to call each of us out of our tombs. There's going to be a physical, bodily resurrection from death, and we will live body and soul together with Jesus forever. And so we rejoice in that. And Lazarus's resurrection, Jesus saying, "Come out," is a preview of exactly our future, what we can expect when Jesus raises us also. Okay, two more words in these chapters that I think are also significant, and that is two very short words, "I am." Jesus 7 times in the Gospel of John uses the phrase "I am" about himself, saying, first is in John chapter 6, "I am the bread of life." And then in John chapter 8, "I am the light of the world." Now, in the section we're looking at today, John 10, 11, and 12, 3 of the 7 "I am" statements of Jesus appear in these 3 chapters, and twice in John 10 and once in John 11. Jesus says, "I am the door," or the gate, for the sheep. He says, "I am the good shepherd." And then he says, "I am the resurrection and the life." And that's really the one I want to focus on. The 5th of the 7 "I am" statements in the Gospel of John, Jesus says, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die." That sounds like a kind of a strange statement. And what does it mean that I live even though I die? Well, I might die physically for a time, but I still live on because I have eternal life in Jesus Christ. And I know that I will never truly die. And since Jesus is the resurrection, we know that at the end, he will raise us up and we will have life forever and ever in the presence of God, in the presence of Jesus, rejoicing in all that he is. Now, just as a preview, there are two more I am statements coming up. As Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and I am the true vine. And we'll see those next time as we continue in the Gospel of John next week. For now, those two very important, very short words, I am, and especially Jesus saying, I am the resurrection and the life. That is what our hope is built on. Jesus Christ giving us life, hope, and assurance that death does not win.